Hello and welcome back. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our headlines. Trump takes a swipe at Elon Musk, saying the government's DOGE Unit might eat Elon over subsidies. He mocks the electric vehicle push and jokes hydrogen cars can blow up. Trump also insists Americans still want options like gas, hybrid or electric. Russia's ex-Deputy Defense Minister Tumar Ivanov gets 13 years for embezzlement and money laundering. The high-profile case exposed deep military corruption blamed for Moscow's Ukraine setbacks. Ivanov denies the charges. His lawyers plan to appeal the verdict. Meanwhile, a Russian diplomat claims Ukraine used UK and French-made Storm Shadow missiles to strike Donetsk, weapons meant for defence. Moscow says foreign specialists likely helped target the strikes, which killed one civilian and damaged multiple buildings, including a music academy, according to officials. India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar met Japan's Takeshi Iwaya at the Quad talks in Washington, reaffirming deep ties in the Indo-Pacific. He stressed stronger infrastructure security and zero tolerance for terrorism as India readies to host the next Quad meeting. President Trump says he hopes a Gaza ceasefire can be reached sometime next week. Talks are reportedly ongoing behind the scenes as pressure mounts to halt the fighting and secure the release of the remaining hostages held by Hamas in the conflict zone. Ukraine has received a fresh $500 million from the IMF, bringing the total wartime aid to $13.3 billion. The IMF kept Ukraine's growth forecast at 2 to 3%, but warned inflation could hit 9% by the end of the year. Conversations between the US and other nations, including Japan and the EU, are ongoing as Trump's 90-day pause comes closer to an end. China has called for the EU to enhance communications and consolidate mutual trust with the EU amid uncertainty. We start this hour in North America. The US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he expects the Senate to approve US President Donald Trump's massive $3.3 trillion tax cut after spending bill later today. Speaking to Fox News, Bessent said the administration hopes to get the bill passed this week and then shift focus to trade deals with China and India. He added they're confident China will stick to its rare earth supply promise. But deep divisions remain in the Senate. Republicans are still struggling to unite as marathon amendment votes continue. Critics warn the bill will add billions to the national debt and slash Medicaid funding. Elon Musk has even threatened to fund primary challenges against Republicans who back the plan. Trump wants the bill passed before July the 4th, and calling it a major boost for defence, border security and middle-class tax cuts. It also includes new rules on artificial intelligence and healthcare. Well, joining us to discuss this bill that continues to stall, though it is making progress, is Madhav Nalapat, the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. Professor Nalapat, thank you ever so much for taking the time to join us. We know there have been hiccups along the way in this bill going through the House of Representatives and now the Senate. Votes have been taking place on amendments to the bill, and Trump wants this done by July the 4th, of course a significant day in US history and in the US calendar. What's the significance of this bill for Donald Trump in the face of questions not just from Democrats, some Republicans, but also his former ally Elon Musk?
Look, quite frankly, Joshua, and let me speak as someone who is a supporter of President Trump, this bill is suicidal for his future and for those Republicans who vote for it. The fact of the matter is that entitlements have been removed from those below the millionaire and billionaire class and enhanced. The tax breaks have been enhanced for the millionaire and billionaire class. Now, I wish the whole world, I mean, the population of the United States, were entirely made up of millionaires and billionaires. But if you walk the streets of any US city, you will find that's not the case. They're billionaires or millionaires. These are billionaires and millionaires who would like to sleep on the pavements and have a really rough life. So I want to say that in my view, Joshua, it's a suicidal bill, and quite suicidal for those Republicans who back it, for a simple reason that even among many Republican voters, there are people who depend on Medicare, Medicaid, and some of the other benefits that Trump has sought to slash, while all the time he is adding a huge amount of additional benefits and slashing taxes for the millionaires and billionaires. This is frankly, I mean, a budget by, for, and of millionaires and billionaires, if I can paraphrase Abraham Lincoln. So I'd like to say, Joshua, passing this bill will be, in this present form, without amendments, will be suicidal for President Trump and the Republican Party, not to mention specifically those who vote in the Senate for this particular bill as it stands, as it has been presented by President Trump.
Yes.
Joshua.
And Professor Nalapat, I do want to bring up this spat between Elon Musk, arguably the world's richest man, and Donald Trump, arguably the world's most powerful man. Of course, their feud started over this bill. There were comments made by either on their social media, but it has circled back round after an apology from the Tesla CEO. Musk once again calling out this bill and threatening to support and to push against those who aren't, those who are looking to push through this bill. How influential can Musk be to the politicians as they continue to look at amendments in order to get this bill through?
Look, Elon Musk is a citizen of the United States who has contributed, in my view, the most to the political campaigns of different parties. He's got a very powerful platform, X, and frankly, he himself is a very listened to voice in the US. So he's going to be pretty risky, frankly, for any candidate whom he's not happy with, and he's made it very clear he will put up rivals who can siphon votes away from the Republicans and doesn't care what happens. The fact of the matter is, Musk is a force in US politics, and if I may say so, Donald Trump helped make him the powerful force that he is by giving him such prominence. Of course, a lot of Musk's recommendations were also, frankly, not really caring enough for the poor, and possibly that reflects his own background as well and his own bank balance. But the reality is, he is certainly a dangerous man to be opposed to. Of course, Trump is vicious when he wants to be, but the fact is, in Musk, he has got a very big target, and frankly, a very dangerous target to take on, because Trump himself is slipping very badly in popularity. He's making, for example, taxes to himself and to his immediate family and to his close friends will go down if this budget is passed. If they were to go up, then Trump would be a hero to those American voters who voted for him, as well as to others. But when they actually go down, he'll become, frankly, unpopular, even with those who voted for him. So I want to say again, Joshua, Elon Musk's stance is one more evidence of the fact this bill is a suicidal bill. And so far as reducing the deficit concerned, he's going to raise it substantially. And he wants the debt ceiling to be completely removed. All this goes completely against his party's orthodoxy. It's not even the Democrats would dare to push for that. This is some ultra-Democrat or some, ultra, if I may say so, free spender who would like to push for that. So I'm at a loss to understand what's happening to President Trump. But whatever is happening, I hope he gets control over himself quite soon. Or I hope whoever is whispering this kind of anti-political suggestions in his ear will frankly be separated from him. Because the fact is, this bill in its present form if it's passed the way the US president wants it to be passed, is suicidal for the president, for the party, and for every legislator who votes for them, for the provisions of this bill, irrespective of whether Elon Musk is the icing on the cake. Irrespective of that, they are going to be, frankly, roadkill, where all they have to do is, all the opponents have to do is to point to these people as the ones who took their benefits away. And that is it. They are not going to get re-elected to the House or Senate. Thank you, Joshua.
Yes, and I just want to allude to those live visuals we were showing you a few moments ago of the Senate. That vote continuing today. Scott Bessent talking about a potential vote on this bill today, but several amendments being discussed. This room will be host to questions, to answers, responses, but also to fierce debate, and we will bring you all of those updates from the Senate as we get them. But let's stick with that Trump-Musk relationship. President Trump is taking fresh swipes at his former ally, hinting the government's efficiency unit, known as DOGE, could crack down on subsidies for Musk's companies. Speaking before boarding Marine One, Trump mocked Musk for criticising his massive tax cut and spending bill, saying Elon benefits more than anyone from government money. Trump also joked that DOGE could eat Elon if needed, calling Musk's stance hypocritical. He went on to slam the electric vehicle mandate, saying not everyone wants an EV and that Americans deserve choices, gas, hybrid or electric. Trump even joked about hydrogen cars blowing up, saying he'd let someone else test drive those first. The spat highlights the growing feud between Trump and one of his party's biggest mega donors. It comes as Musk vows to unseat Republicans who back the bill. Trump's message is clear, though. He's ready to cut subsidies if Musk keeps attacking his spending plan. Well, President Trump is heading to Florida today to visit the state's controversial new migrant detention center, nicknamed Alligator Alcatraz. The massive facility sits deep in the Everglades, about 60 kilometers from Miami, surrounded by swamps, alligators and snakes. Florida officials say the remote location makes escapes nearly impossible. The site at Dade Collier Airport will soon hold up to 5,000 migrants in tents and trailers. It's expected to cost Florida around $450 million a year to run, with help from federal funds. Governor Ron DeSantis says the centre will process and deport migrants faster, with planes ready to fly people out directly from the runway. Critics warn, however, of overcrowding, poor conditions and risks during Florida's hurricane season. Indigenous groups and environmentalists also fear damage to sacred lands and the Everglades ecosystem. Despite protests, Trump's visit signals his push to ramp up deportations and expand detention capacity nationwide as part of his tough new immigration crackdown. Let's have a listen to what Trump told reporters.
You know, the snakes are fast, but alligators are, we're going to teach them how to run away from an alligator, okay? If they escape prison, how to run away. Don't run in a straight line. Run like this. And you know what? Your chances go up about 1%. Okay? Not a good thing.
Well, joining us once again is Professor Madhav Nalapat. Thank you for staying with us. This, of course, another move in Trump's promise from his election to step up deportations, look at migration, and mass deportation, something he's focused on. But critics, as we've just said there, questioning the validity of this space, but also its purpose, given Florida's difficulty facing disasters like hurricanes, but also the area in which it's sat on. Do you think this is a move of desperation from Trump to try and continue his agenda in the face of adversity over his immigration policy? Or do you think this is just another step towards his ultimate goal, which is potentially millions of people deported?
Look, I'd like to point out that Alcatraz, one would believe it is a prison for hardened criminals. A lot of the present inmates of prison are basically immigrants who have overstayed or people who have not committed violent crimes. A whole lot of them, the overwhelming majority, hardly a small number. Yeah, I think it's about
Professor
less than...
Madhav Nalapat, I'm really sorry to cut you off. Donald Trump is now speaking live, and we're going to cut to that with Ron DeSantis.
Florida constitutes about 20% of all immigration arrests nationwide. So, what I would just say is, don't let Florida be the only state. We've got very red states that should be doing this just as much as Florida's doing. That will increase their numbers. And then what happens is you'll have a lot of people that will deport on their own because they don't want to end up in an Alligator, Alcatraz, or some of those other places. So I think this is a model, but we need other states to step up.
I was going to ask you, would this be enticing for other states to come up with their own model?
They are doing it. We have Louisiana doing it big. Alabama's doing it. We have a lot of states. They seem to be red states and not too many blue states for whatever reason. You know, it's but the red states, Republican-run states, are doing it. The blue states don't do very well at security and policing, unfortunately. What would you say, Chris?
You know, I would say that exactly right. The governor here has been fantastic in forming this partnership with the Department of Homeland Security. We were looking at different contracts with different vendors and thought, why not go straight?
Well, Donald Trump there with Ron DeSantis and Kristi Noem, key allies in his administration. Ron DeSantis there talking about the potential for this alligator, Alcatraz as it's being called, to be a deterrent. I just want to bring Madhav Nalapat back in to look at that claim. We've seen this sort of deterrent run campaign against illegal immigration in Europe, and over in Europe it hasn't been successful. Do you think this level of deterrence, this camp that could hold 5,000 people in an area that might not be one that somebody wants to live in, do you think that will be enough to stop illegal immigrants wanting to get into the US? And will it do anything to get people to voluntarily deport, as Ron DeSantis just said there?
Look, I'd like to point out that several of the people who are going to land up in Alcatraz are not violent and never been violent in their lives, nor will they be violent in the future. The reality is that you have a large number of people. Donald Trump is one of them. Marco Rubio is another. A large number of people whose parents or grandparents migrated to the United States, and they did very well. And almost all of them have lived a life free of crime. I can understand if it's the dangerous, hardened, known criminals among the illegal immigrants, but you're talking about mass deportation. You're not talking of any such discrimination. Even people who have not done any violent crime in their whole life, who have not committed acts of violence their whole life, will land up in this most terrible prison. So the reality is, it's further strengthening Trump's image, not as a strong man, as a ruthless man who his own niece, I think his cousin, Mary Trump, described as having absolutely no empathy at all. It just goes to demonstrate that point. And in my view, is an absolutely horrific point for the United States to demonstrate. And it's very, very helpful to China, because the Chinese will say, well, you may think that we have got problems, but we are humane compared to US under President Trump. And they may well make that claim. So the reality is, this is of great help to China. It's of almost no help to the United States. And frankly, it just feeds into the very large, widening narrative that Trump has absolutely no empathy for those who are not millionaires or billionaires. And a lot of his budget also has got into that situation. So I just want to say, I think President Trump had better, refresh his policies before he himself, frankly, is under threat of yet another impeachment. And this time around, the numbers may be a lot more than the previous, where it was definitely persecution. Now it is Trump who is doing the persecution of innocent people, frankly. Many of these people have committed no crimes at all. And as a consequence, what's happening is that that they are being put in this notorious prison. So I would only like to say, as a supporter of President Trump, as someone who's always backed him, and you can check my online and my statements in the past, the reality is this is a suicidal course for Trump and for those Republicans who support him. And I wish he would get off this kind of a route. It's a route which will end up in the political wilderness for him and possibly the defeat of his party, which is going to make the White House completely a lame duck in the final 2 years of presidency. And already, as I said, his popularity has gone down. It will further plummet, Joshua.
Professor Madhav Nalapat, you will be staying with us as we head away from North America for the moment and head over towards Europe. Former Russian Deputy Defense Minister Timur Ivanov has been found guilty of corruption and sentenced to 13 years in prison. Ivanov was arrested in April of 2024 on suspicion of taking bribes, and investigators added new embezzlement charges in October. His case is part of the biggest slew of corruption scandals to hit the Russian defense establishment in years. More than a dozen people, including 2 other former deputy ministers, have been arrested in a series of investigations. Ivanov, who had pleaded not guilty, was also stripped of all of his state awards. His lawyer said he would appeal the decision. Here is what the judge said.
По совокупности преступлений на основании частей 3-4 статьи 69 Уголовного кодекса Российской Федерации назначить Иванову окончательное наказание путем частичного сложения, определив его в виде лишения свободы сроком на 13 лет с отбыванием наказания в исправительной колонии общего режима со штрафом в размере 100 миллионов рублей.
Well, Russian state media has suggested that the total sum alleged to have been embezzled by Ivanov and others was around $50 million, mostly in the form of bank transfers to 2 foreign accounts. According to these reports, the trial took place behind closed doors on grounds of state secrecy. A former subordinate of Ivanov, Antov Filatov, was also sentenced to 12 and a half years. Russian media has said that Ivanov and his wife owned a luxury apartment in central Moscow and a 3-story English-style mansion on the outskirts of the capital, and an extensive collection of classic cars, including a Bentley and an Aston Martin. Once again joining us, Professor Madhav Nalapat. This movement here, if of course true, the action that he's done, this sentencing of over 10 years is a severe punishment and a statement. What's the significance of this, a key figure in the Russian regime going to prison at a time of war?
Well, frankly, it amounts to treason, and I'm surprised if he gets away with just 10 years in prison, because this is treason. When a country is at war, sabotaging its defenses is an act of treason. So very frankly, I'm glad this action was taken. It's high time this action was taken, and I think President Putin understands that corruption is leading to the way, for example, the Ukraine war has dragged on. It's not been easy for the Russians, a much bigger side, despite, of course, the Russians have shown some restraint in attacking other targets apart from Ukraine. But the reality is that they have plainly shown that they are unable to recover at the speed and to the level that they would have liked. So I think part of the reason is this kind of corruption, and I personally feel I'm very glad this action was taken. I feel many more such people should be brought to justice, and that's the only way the Russian defense establishment can protect itself. And frankly, Donald Trump is working something very interesting, which is trying and bringing Russia to the US side, and that would be a real revolution for Trump, for US foreign policy, and for the whole world. Thank you, Joshua.
Yes, thank you, Professor Nalapat. You are staying with us as we move away from Europe, and we brought you that live press conference from India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar And before that live footage, he met with Japanese Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya on the sidelines of the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting in Washington, D.C., reaffirming strategic alignment between New Delhi and Tokyo in the Indo-Pacific. Jaishankar highlighted their comprehensive discussions on infrastructure, investment and regional security, saying the India-Japan Special Strategic Partnership continues to deepen and diversify. This comes as Quad ministers from India, the US, Japan and Australia met in Washington to consolidate efforts on maritime security, resilient supply chains and the freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific. Speaking ahead of the ministerial, Jaishankar emphasised that differences will arise in any strong relationship, but the maturity lies in resolving them constructively. He also said the India-US trade talks were progressing and hinted that they are now past the halfway point. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio hosting his first major diplomatic gathering since Trump's re-election, aimed to refocus attention on the Indo-Pacific despite tensions flaring elsewhere, including in the Middle East. S. Jaishankar also inaugurated a UN exhibit titled The Human Cost of Terrorism in New York, reiterating India's firm stance on zero tolerance for terrorism. As India prepares to host the upcoming Quad Leaders Summit, Jaishankar's US visit is aimed at reinforcing strategic trust, even as friction simmers beneath the surface. We head now from Washington to the Middle East, and Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar says Israel's recent strikes on Iran have weakened threats not only to Israel, but also to Europe and the wider West. Speaking alongside Lithuania's Foreign Minister in Vilnius, Saar said Israel's actions severely damaged Iran's supply of drones, the same drones helping Russia in Ukraine. He described Israel as a key strategic partner for Europe, highlighting that its operations have pushed back Iran's nuclear program and intercepted thousands of Iranian drones. Saar warned the threat is bigger than Israel alone, calling the fight a struggle between the free world and what he called a radical axis led by Iran and backed by Russia, China and North Korea. He thanked Lithuania for standing with Israel and urged Europe not to be confused about where its security interests lie. Saar also reiterated Israel's commitment to reach a ceasefire deal with Hamas if hostages are freed and weapons laid down. Well, joining us to discuss these comments made is Jordan Cope, a Middle East expert who's joining us from Erfurt in Germany. Jordan, thank you as always for being here. I want to look solely at this moment at these comments that have been made by Gideon Saar, looking at Europe and the Russia-Ukraine conflict and linking that to the Israel-Iran conflict, the 12-day war that took place. How significant could that alliance be, given that the US and Israel are also aligned as well in a world which is facing conflict on multiple fronts?
The world needs to realize that Iranian terrorism poses a threat not just to Israel, but to the world over. One must not forget that Hezbollah operates bases not just in the Middle East, an Iranian-sponsored terrorist organization and a proxy of Iran that has traditionally received $400 to $700 million a year, but it also has bases in South America and perhaps even in the Caribbean. It was reported that Hezbollah had bases in Cuba. Iran was also responsible, supposedly, for assassination attempts on President Trump's life, and recently it was developing ballistic missiles that were capable of hitting Europe. Iran decided to export a project of terrorism throughout much of the Middle East, and it ultimately funded these projects not just through its own funding, but the terror proxies funded themselves through drug trades, working with cartels worldwide. And so the threat that Iranian terrorism poses isn't just one circle, it's multiple concentric circles that has very real, devastating impacts, not just to leadership in the United States, but to communities throughout the world. And when Iran was able, if it were able to produce nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles capable of hitting Europe, by all means, it could exercise threats to intimidate Europe into its alignment.
Yes, Jordan, if you can stay with us, thank you for the response with that. We're going to move on, but stay in the Middle East and look at President Donald Trump, who says he hopes a Gaza ceasefire will be reached sometime next week. Speaking to reporters before leaving the White House, Trump confirmed he will discuss Gaza and Iran when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visits Washington. Trump called the recent Iran strike a great success and said the focus now is on securing the release of hostages and ending the fighting in Gaza. Netanyahu's upcoming US trip will also include meetings with Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other top officials as both sides push to wrap up a broader trade and security agenda. Well, Jordan, we of course just touched on comments by Gideon Sai. He said, we ended that brief section by looking at his comments that the war could end if the hostages are released and the fighting is stopped from Hamas. Donald Trump sounding optimistic there by saying a Gaza ceasefire deal could be made next week. Now, we've heard this rhetoric from Trump before, but do you think, given the conflict with Iran and the resolution that has come from that, do you think that Israel are more inclined to look at a ceasefire in Gaza now that Iran have potentially been weakened?
I would like to quickly add before addressing that we also heard similar claims from Biden. We have to understand what Hamas's motive here is to prolong the war as long as possible, to delegitimize Israel, and to also expose Israel's inability to protect its own citizens. It's a bifurcated process to try to delegitimize Israel, once amongst global opinion and the other amongst Israelis themselves, making themselves fear that Israel cannot protect them. Israel's done an outstanding job of protecting its own, but regarding Donald Trump's recent aspirations, he can say all he wants, but Hamas also has its own motives in drawing out this war. Israel has made very clear that it is willing to accept Donald Trump's ceasefire arrangements that would hopefully free all the hostages and hopefully also expel Hamas's leadership from the Gaza Strip. The ultimate question is not what Israel wants, it's how Hamas will respond, being a thorn in the side, being also desperate to demonstrate any power that it still has remaining, and the 25% of the territory of the Gaza Strip still under its control, and also as it competes for power with the Abu Shabaab militia group in the Gaza Strip and other militia groups that are now uprising against Hamas. So, very short in summary, it depends what Hamas wants ultimately, whether the ceasefire will be achieved. Israel has been very compliant with US expectations, and it hasn't been rewarded because Hamas continues to thwart such efforts.
Jordan Cope, thank you as always for joining us and providing your insight. We will, of course, be across all the developments, not just in that meeting between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump and in his top team, but also towards any work in a ceasefire in Gaza. But we move now back to Europe. And according to the Ukrainian Finance Ministry, Ukraine has received approximately $500 million from the International Monetary Fund, marking the 9th tranche under the Extended Fund Facility Programme. The EFF programme has allocated $15.5 billion to Ukraine in budget support over a 4-year period. Moreover, since it began in 2023, the programme has delivered $10.6 billion to Ukraine. According to the IMF, Ukraine successfully met all quantitative performance criteria reportedly through March 2025, including the prior action to submit a detailed reform plan for the State Customs Service. The IMF has also extended deadlines for several Ukrainian reforms, including appointing a new customs chief. First Deputy Managing Director of the IMF, Gita Gopinath, has said that Ukraine must continue anti-corruption reforms, including appointing a new head of the Economic Security Bureau and strengthening money laundering rules. The IMF has kept its 2025 growth forecast for Ukraine at 2 to 3%, as improved electricity supply is balanced by reduced gas output and weaker agricultural exports. The international body expects inflation, however, to reach 9% by the year end, and recommend that Ukraine's central bank maintain tight monetary policy warning it should stand ready for further tightening if inflationary expectations worsen. The next programme review is scheduled for mid-September 2025, with an IMF mission expected to visit Ukraine in August to assess progress on reform commitments. Moving on, but staying in Europe, and tensions amounting in Moldova ahead of the September 28th parliamentary elections as the country braces to host the high-profile EU-Moldova summit in Chisinau on July the 4th. But what's billed as a show of European solidarity is being sharply criticised by the opposition as a blatant attempt to prop up President Maia Sandu and her pro-Western ruling party. Former President Igor Dodon, now head of Moldova's largest opposition party, the Party of Socialists, has accused the European Union of gross interference in the country's internal affairs. In remarks to Russian news agency TASS, Dodon said the summit was organised to save Sandu and her party from defeat. What business does Ursula von der Leyen or Emmanuel Macron have influencing our elections? The summit will be attended by top EU leaders, including European Commission President von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa. Meanwhile, political tensions have intensified with Moldova's prosecution of Eugenia Gatzel, the head of the autonomous Gozia region. Prosecutors are demanding a 9-year sentence for Gatzel over alleged embezzlement tied to her election campaign. But Gatzel's defence says the charges are politically motivated and an attempt by Sandu's government to silence regional opposition or pro-Russia voices. Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova condemned the charges as a liberal dictatorship in auction, accusing Brussels of forcing Western political values on Moldova. Gatzel, who was elected in 2023, publicly advocates closer ties with Russia and has faced persistent efforts by Chisinau to invalidate her election and block her from taking office. Her lawyer says an appeal will be filed with the European Court of Human Rights, citing a lack of judicial independence in Moldova. With opposition anger growing, the July 4th summit is shaping up not only as a diplomatic gathering, but as a flashpoint in Moldova's increasingly polarised political landscape. Heading away from Europe, Pakistan has assumed the presidency of the UN Security Council for the month of July, taking on the role with what it calls a deep sense of purpose and commitment to multilateralism. Islamabad secured its non-permanent seat earlier this year with overwhelming support, winning 182 out of 193 votes. The presidency rotates monthly among the Council's 15 members. Pakistan's ambassador to the UN, Asim Iftikhar Ahmad, says he's fully aware of the global challenges ahead, including rising conflicts and humanitarian crises. He's already met with Secretary-General Antonio Guterres to brief him on the Council's July agenda. Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar will chair two key high-level events, an open debate on promoting peace through multilateralism on July the 22nd, and a briefing on cooperation between the UN and the OIC on July the 24th. Pakistan says it will run a transparent and inclusive presidency and hopes for timely collective action from the Council. Moving on now, the Danish and Swedish royal couples came together on Monday to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Øresund Bridge, a vital link connecting Copenhagen and Malmö. King Frederick X and Queen Mary of Denmark joined Sweden's King Carl XVI, Gustav and Queen Sylvia on the bridge's midpoint, echoing the inaugural royal meeting held in 2000. The Øresund Bridge, a 16-kilometre road and rail link, has become a symbol of Nordic unity, boosting regional trade, tourism and daily commuting. Celebrations included a royal drive across the bridge, a stop on the artificial island of Pebberholm, and speeches highlighting the bridge's role in regional cooperation. Earlier in June, over 40,000 runners took part in a symbolic race across the bridge, marking the milestone with mass public participation. Officials say the anniversary also signals plans for deeper cross-border integration and renewed infrastructure investment in the Øresund region. Staying in the European region, Dutch Crown Princess Catharina Amalia will soon begin military training at the Netherlands Defence City College, where she'll train as a reservist while continuing her university studies in law. The 21-year-old royal follows a growing trend among European heirs taking on formal military roles as part of public service. Her father, King Willem Alexander, also completed military training during his youth. She has applied and been accepted to the programme at Defence City College, a defence initiative aimed at connecting students with part-time roles that offer meaningful experience while increasing the visibility of the armed forces within society. She has applied and been accepted to the programme, and yes, it is of course looking at her role as a royal. French Prime Minister Francois Bayrou has called on Algeria to grant a presidential pardon to Boualem Sansal, the 80-year-old French-Algerian author recently sentenced to 5 years in prison under Algeria's anti-terror laws. Sansal was convicted of undermining national unity after comments he made about Algeria's border with Morocco, remarks that Algerian authorities deemed threatening. The writer, who is battling cancer, appeared visibly frail during his recent appeal hearing. Bayrou expressed hope that Algeria would show clemency and humanity, urging President Abdelmadjid Tebboune to intervene. French President Emmanuel Macron has also previously called for Sansal's release, highlighting the case's humanitarian and diplomatic stakes. The verdict has further strained relations between Algiers and Paris, already tense over colonial history, migration policy, and France's ties with Morocco. Supporters of Sansal argue the ruling criminalises free expression and targets critical voices under the guise of national security. Let's have a listen to what the French Prime Minister said.
La situation que Boualem Sansal subit est une situation que tous les Français et le gouvernement français trouvent insupportable, à juste titre. Maintenant qu'il y a eu condamnation, on peut imaginer que des mesures de grâce, notamment en fonction de la santé de notre compatriote, soient prises. Et je sais, je ne doute pas, et je sais que toutes les instances exécutives, depuis le président de la République jusqu'au gouvernement, agissent en ce sens, de manière que l'humanité triomphe dans une affaire qui est pour les Français insupportable.
Moving on now, and in a massive national security crackdown, US law enforcement has arrested a New Jersey man and seized laptop stashes in 16 states, part of an alleged North Korean effort to infiltrate the US tech sector and fund Pyongyang's weapons program. The Justice Department says North Korean workers, with help from operatives in the US, China and elsewhere, got jobs at over 100 American companies. In one case, they stole sensitive military technology. In another, they drained $740,000 from a tech firm in Georgia. Authorities say some American laptop farms logging into company systems to mask the foreign workers' true locations. One targeted company was a California defense contractor working on AI technology. 6 Chinese and 2 Taiwanese nationals have also been charged, and all remain at large. 4 North Korean hackers are accused of stealing nearly $1 million in cryptocurrency from firms in the US and Serbia, and then laundering the funds through foreign accounts. The FBI calls this just a snapshot of North Korea's broader strategy, using thousands of overseas workers to circumvent sanctions and finance its nuclear program. This isn't the first time. Previous cases have tied North Korean workers to identity fraud, animation projects and crypto jobs, often without employers realizing who was really behind the screen. Moving on, footage of detained groups of Russians said to be arrested on suspicion of drug trafficking and cybercrime has been released by Azerbaijani state media. The video shows them being handcuffed, made to march in line and being bundled into police vans. Well, this comes after Russia summoned the Azerbaijani ambassador to Moscow today to receive an official protest over what the Russian Foreign Ministry said were unfriendly actions of Baku, as well as deliberate steps that the Azerbaijani side took to dismantle their bilateral relations. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said that the journalists' arrests were an extremely emotional reaction by Azerbaijan, and Russia aimed to negotiate their release. This comes after police raided the offices of Russia's state-funded news outlet Sputnik. According to reports, officials have said that the outlet was operating illegally after losing its accreditation in February this year. During the raid, masked officers arrested staff members, including Sputnik Azerbaijan's editor-in-chief and director. Russia has condemned the arrests, calling them illegal detentions of Russian journalists. Azerbaijan's raid comes after a deadly incident last week in Russia's Yekaterinburg city. Russian police raided homes of ethnic Azerbaijanis. There, 2 brothers were killed and 9 others were detained. Family members say the men were beaten, tortured with electric shocks, and treated like animals. Meanwhile, officials claim the raids were linked to a long murder investigation. In response, Azerbaijan cancelled a planned official visit to Moscow and stopped Russian cultural events in Baku. Tensions were already high after an Azerbaijani passenger jet was shot at near Grozny last year. Since then, ties between Moscow and Baku have worsened. Azerbaijan's president also skipped Russia's Victory Day parade this year and has moved closer to Ukraine. Despite the latest events, the Kremlin says it wants to keep good relations with Azerbaijan. We're heading back to North America next, and the jury in the sex trafficking trial of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs has returned for a second day of deliberations. Monday saw over 5 hours of discussions, but no verdict yet. This case, which opened in early May, centres on serious charges of sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. Federal prosecutors allege that Combs ran a 2-decade operation using his celebrity status and network to coerce girlfriends into performing sexual acts with male sex workers, often while he watched or recorded the drug-fueled encounters. The defence argues that Combs' private life, while controversial, is being mischaracterised as criminal conduct. They say this was consensual swinger activity and not sex trafficking. Combs, who is 55, has pleaded not guilty and chose not to testify. His team relied on strong cross-examination of government witnesses, including former employees who testified only after being granted immunity. If convicted on all counts, Combs could face between 15 years to life in prison. Inside the courtroom, the tensions are palpable. Family and friends of Combs gathered in support, praying together as he clapped and joined them. The music mogul, meanwhile, is reportedly passing time reading The Power of Positive Thinking and The Happiness Advantage. The jury continues its deliberations today. A dangerous heatwave is gripping multiple regions across the globe, with temperatures smashing records and prompting emergency measures. In Europe, Spain, Portugal, France and Italy are enduring sweltering heat, with temperatures soaring to 46 degrees Celsius. French authorities have issued red alerts across 16 regions, closed schools and set up cooling zones. Italy has placed over 20 cities under maximum heat alert. In Turkey, wildfires have broken out in Izmir, forcing evacuations as flames rage through dry forests. In the UK and Germany, temperatures have neared 39 degrees, causing water shortages, travel disruptions and threatening to break historical records. Scotland is also expecting its hottest June day ever. Over in the United States, Governor Kathy Hochul has declared a state of emergency as a scorching heatwave strikes New York. The city is facing what could be its hottest end to June in 125 years. Paris authorities shut down the summit of the Eiffel Tower until Wednesday due to extreme heat. Police have banned most vehicles to curb pollution, and speed limits have been lowered in certain areas. Experts warn that young children, the elderly and those with chronic illnesses are at serious risk. Climate scientists say heat waves like this are now more frequent and more extreme due to human-induced climate change. Portugal also remains on high alert, with temperatures reaching above 40 degrees in several cities. A rare roll cloud caused panic in northern beaches today as strong winds and dark skies swept the coastline. Spain recorded a new June high of 46 degrees in the south, while red alerts remain in place across 18 Italian cities, including Rome and Milan. Italy also saw deadly flash floods in Piedmont, claiming a life as local officials warn that once rare extreme weather is now routine. Meanwhile, in Turkey, over 50,000 people have been evacuated due to out-of-control wildfires, and in Greece, firefighters continue to battle blazes fueled by scorching temperatures. Authorities urge people to stay hydrated, avoid the sun and protect the vulnerable as extreme heat puts lives and infrastructure at risk. Climate experts warn this may be the new normal. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more